Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Guys, we've made it through my Mission Impossible series leading up to Rogue Nation coming out very soon, and this just might be the best one. Now, I went out and bought this on Blu-ray back in the day, and since I'm a huge collector, I also bought the Steelbook from Target that was like an exclusive, and I've never opened it. It's still in its packaging, and I'll never open it probably, because I'm a weird collector guy. Don't judge me. MI3 helped revitalize the franchise again because 2 was pretty bad, but there was still a very long break in between 3 and Ghost Protocol. And some people were wondering if this movie is even necessary. Maybe Tom Cruise is too old to continue doing this. My gosh, did everyone involved with Ghost Protocol prove all the naysayers wrong. In this film, the entire IMF has been disavowed. The president has invoked Ghost Protocol. In classic spy movie style, a terrorist has gotten his hands on nuclear codes, and Ethan Hunt and his small team are the only people who can stop him. Now, similar to my previous Mission Impossible reviews, if you have not seen this film yet, this review is gonna contain spoilers, guys. So if you haven't seen the film, I suggest checking it out first and then coming back and watching my review. You've been warned. Let's talk about this thing. One of the best Pixar directors there ever was Brad Bird. He made movies like Ratatouille and The Incredibles. The guy really understood how to make a great animated film. This was his first live-action movie, and he knocked it out of the park. This is an extremely crisp, almost electric looking movie. There's a sleekness to the entire film, a polished look that most action films nowadays do not have. The cinematography is gorgeous. The hand-to-hand combat was filmed beautifully. Stunning wide shots of incredible stunt work. Gorgeous looking stuff. This movie brought back the minor character of Benji, played by Simon Pegg in MI3, and fleshed out his role to have a huge part in this movie. He's now in the field, he's an operative, he has his computer, he knows what he's doing, and he added so much to this movie, so much humor, and he was just great with Cruise. They had amazing chemistry. I'm so glad they're bringing him back for 5. They also added Paula Patton and gave her a very good backstory, as well as a badass character, and Jeremy Renner, Hawkeye himself, in the film. He also has an interesting backstory, a character who's harboring secrets that have direct connections to Ethan Hunt. And right off the bat, from the opening scene of this movie where they're breaking Hunt out of this strange prison, it's very suspenseful, which is a great callback to the original Mission Impossible movie, and something that I think 2 completely forgot about, and even 3, because 3 I wouldn't call a suspenseful movie. It was basically a non-stop action thrill ride. MI4 was a great callback to that first film that was a lot more about tension. And as I already mentioned with Simon Pegg's character, there is a great sense of humor in Mission Impossible 4, something that was lacking from the other 2. MI3 had a few chuckly moments, MI2 had virtually nothing, but this movie is by far the funniest in the entire franchise. Something else about Ghost Protocol that I love every time I watch it is the fact that it's the first one in the entire franchise where their spy gadgets don't always work. It was such a great idea because up until then, the mission was always impossible because it was really hard, but their tech pretty much always worked. In this film, it's not just a really difficult mission. Their tech keeps breaking as well, which makes it even more impossibler. That's not a word. From early on in the movie, when he gets his famous "this message will self-destruct in 5 seconds" from this old telephone, it doesn't work. He's got to hit it really hard for the message to self-destruct. The mask maker that's making their disguises, that thing breaks and they have to go on without masks. When he's using his gloves in the famous Burj Khalifa scene, they start malfunctioning. The laser cutter malfunctions. Every bit of their tech malfunctions, and that was such a great idea because it made you feel like they were actual people and less like these amazing, invincible superhero spies that have everything perfect all the time. Another thing that Brad Bird and the writers did so well in this movie was maintain a constant sense of urgency. Every scene feels important. There always is this sense of, we have to get going, we gotta go, something's bad about to happen, we need to get this going. And it was always this intense level of adrenaline throughout every scene, and that was something that was really important. But this film understood how to make it flow better, because the problem I had with 3, even though I really enjoy it, is that yes, it's intense, it's urgent, there's always something happening, but there was rarely ever those character building moments, and it was sort of way too fast and too much happening at once. That was my only real issue with 3. With this film, they maintained that thrill level, but they stretched it out, they fleshed out the characters as best they could, so you could actually care more when this crazy stuff was happening. But by far, my biggest issue with this movie is definitely the villain. This is something I've talked about in my previous 3 reviews. The Mission Impossible series has a hard time with compelling villains. Philip Seymour Hoffman was probably the best one we've had so far. In the first film, spoilers for MI1, Jim Phelps, who is eventually revealed as the villain, he's not really the villain until the end. I mean, you find out, okay, he's been a villain the whole time, but it wasn't really till the last couple scenes that you realize that. Jon Voight was great in that movie, but in this film, I think it might actually be the weakest villain of the entire franchise, because even in MI2, at least the villain was there constantly, and they actually cut back to him a lot. He was a bit of a cartoon character, but he was a villain. The one in MI4 might actually be the worst of the entire franchise. It's portrayed by a great actor, Nyqvist. Sorry if I said that incorrectly. He's fantastic. He just didn't really have anything to do in this movie. Originally, there was a deleted scene. The very opening scene was going to be him. This big scene that kind of fleshed him out a little bit more. But they cut it in favor of a more intense opening, which I understand. But his character is really just an evil guy who wants to blow stuff up, and he has a strange reason for doing it. It just was not a good villain. It was a very boring character, and by far the worst part of this movie. The real antagonist, I like to think, is the situation. The heroes are constantly in a terrible situation. As I said, the sense of urgency. Something's always going wrong. Something's always breaking. They always are just a little bit too late to whatever they're trying to get to. To me, that's really the antagonist of this movie, because the actual antagonist is so boring. Let's talk about my favorite sequence in the entire movie, the Dubai sequence. I'm not just talking about the amazing building scene, but the chase through the sandstorm. All of that is action movie gold. It's perfectly directed stuff. I love it. My issue with it, despite the fact that it is perfectly directed in my opinion, is its placement in the film. There's a sense that the film peaks early with the Dubai stuff, and then what happens after that, where they have to infiltrate this party and Paula Patton has to seduce this rich man, the film sort of stalls. And then it picks back up again quickly with this fantastic hand-to-hand combat scene in this advanced parking deck. And all that finale stuff is really fun, but it just screeches to a halt with this party scene. I just feel if they could have switched those two acts in a way, have the rich guy party scene more towards the middle and then the big actiony stuff towards the end. But it's a sort of strange complaint to have, to say that the film is so freaking great and then not as great but still really good. It's such a nitpicky little thing, but as a critic I look at things like that. But that Burj Khalifa scene is one of the best action scenes in movie history. Tom Cruise doing all of his own stunts, them actually out there filming it. His no shit joke is perfect every time. I love it. When I showed that scene to my sister, who has a fear of heights, she could barely watch, and that is perfect because you can really tell when you're watching that scene that's real. You can see Cruise's legs kind of dangling, and you can just tell this guy's really out there. All of these things that could not have been accomplished inside a set or with green screen were accomplished with that scene, and it's one of the best in action movie history. And this movie really understood the team dynamic of what Mission Impossible is. It's not just Ethan Hunt's show. It is a Tom Cruise movie, but he has a team that supports him that needs to function properly. And in the final scene in the film, that's what he says. He says, "Nothing on our mission worked, everything broke, except this team. This team functioned incredibly," and that is what Mission Impossible is. It's a team, and it's so great to see Ving Rhames in that one final scene as Luther Stickle, who's, I keep saying this in every review, he's like my favorite character in the whole franchise. I love that guy, and he was so funny in just the brief time he had. Now, throughout the entire movie, there was this storyline that Ethan Hunt and his wife had gotten a divorce, and then you find out that Jeremy Renner's character was actually there when she was killed, and then Ethan Hunt killed her murderers and ended up in prison. It gave a really good sense of tension between those two characters throughout the film, but at the end they decided to reshoot it to have his wife still be alive, but she's kind of in hiding because he wants to keep her safe. Now, the reason Brad Bird said he did this was because he didn't want the film to have the Alien 3 syndrome, where from the beginning of this film, all of a sudden characters from the last film you cared about are just dead. So I like the fact that he respected the previous film and honored it in that way, although it does feel kind of like a tacked on addition that doesn't 100% work. All in all, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol is quite possibly the best film in the franchise. Its only competition in my mind is the very first one. I think it's a great action film. It's funny, it's extremely thrilling, and immensely well shot. I'm going to give Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol an A. Well guys, I've now officially covered every classic Mission Impossible film leading up to Rogue Nation. I'm very excited to see that film. I'm hoping it's just as good as 4, if not better. I'm looking forward to reviewing that for you guys. If you want to see all my previous reviews, they are on my channel right now and linked in this description if you want to check them out. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. I really do appreciate it. And if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.